Hi, this is Dave at daveblair.com, and today I wanted to talk to you about. I had a lot of questions about mic technique, and the subject always comes up with different singers and voice classes that I've been in. So just some basic things. A lot of people don't know how to hold a mic. I've even seen bands live, and I've seen a lot of engineers, soundmen complain about singers that don't know how to use a microphone. Some of them get really annoyed about it too. So let's talk about certain things. Most times when you're singing live, and that's what I'm talking about here really, is that you're going to be using what they call a hypercariod or supercardioid dynamic mic. Sometimes a condenser mic. Uh, Basically what that means is because you're on a loud stage, and what's going to be happening is you have a loud drum kit next to you, a guitar player playing his Marshall, blasting way too loud, and sometimes you don't have control of that. So you want to be heard. You don't want feedback. And you want it to be clear, and we want to figure out how to balance this out and maximize that. And a few things that I see singers doing wrong. Let's talk about the few things. The concept of the hypercardioid mic is that it picks up what's right in front of it very well, and it rejects things from the side. Look, I'm singing just as close from the side, and you could barely hear me. And as I rotate, see, wow. And as I come around to the side of the mic, it totally just drops off. And I go to the back, and you could hardly hear me. And that's really great because that way it only picks up my singing and not the drummer and the bass player and then the tracks coming through the monitors and even my voice coming back through the monitors, which will cause feedback. So, the monitor might be here, but because it's rejecting from the back, mostly usually like from about 45-degree angles where the most rejection is, then you won't get feedback. What causes feedback is the sound from the speakers of the voice that's coming through the microphone comes back into the microphone, starts this vicious loop, and all of a sudden you hear squealing and screeching. And a lot of amateur bands, you hear that throughout their show, and it's very annoying. And it's annoying to singers. Usually what's happening is the singer can't hear themselves, or over the loud band, they keep turning it up, then it starts squealing, feeding back. So it's this vicious thing of I can't hear myself or it's feeding back. How do we fix that? How do we deal with that? There's a few things. So first of all, let's talk about the mic technique. Now, there's such a thing called proximity effect. So which means as I get closer, I get louder, but it also adds a lot of bottom ends to the mic, which may be good. If you're a female singer that has a thinner voice, adding this bottom may be good. But if you're trying to get some clarity, sometimes I just notice it's getting a little muddy. So sometimes, often if the band isn't so blaring, you could back off a little bit. You lose a little volume, but you gain quite a bit of clarity about an inch out. If it's a quieter environment, acoustic show or something, you could get up to 2 inches. You get the loudness, and you won't get you're gonna have to turn up the mic, but you're not gonna get feedback because you're not competing with a loud band. Sometimes it's hard to do that because the band is so loud in a lot of the hard rock bands and things like that. So you kind of eat the mic sometimes, and that low end muddiness you can make up for it with EQing. Often on boards, it drives me crazy because I'll see a friend's band and the vocals are like this, and it's like it sounds like they're under a blanket or something. And I go with the board, and the EQ is like I went to one show where the 60 hertz on the board was like boosted by like 5 dB, which basically is going to make you sound like you're in a incredibly dark and underwater. So you should have a basic concept of how to use your mixer, how to EQ. So basically, on a board, usually you have a button that could cut off anything below, sometimes it's 60, 70, 80 hertz. For a vocal, you could press that in, which means it cuts off all the low end. So that'll cut off a lot of the handling noise, that low end thing. It'll cut off low frequencies that muddy it up, that are not going to be really enhance the vocal at all. Also, you have usually an EQ knob at the bottom, which is usually like 80 hertz or so. You could, if it's a little muddy, you could back that off a little bit. Everything else on the board, it depends on the board. Some of them have a fixed frequency that you could boost or cut. What a lot of singers do is those kind of just boost the highs and the mids a smidge. If you have what they call a sweepable mid. Don't get stressed out by the terminology. All that means is I could adjust the frequency that the EQ knob affects, and I could boost or cut that specific frequency. That's going to be a whole nother video, so I don't want to get into that too much. But basically, if you put everything flat, right down the middle, maybe back off a low end, and sometimes play a little bit, in rehearsal, whatever, to get a feel of what the knobs do as a start. That's important because sometimes just a little smidge, a millimeter here and there on a knob could make a big difference. That's important. But also mic technique, again, is important. So if you're getting too muddy, maybe back it off just a little bit and see how much clearer it gets. You lose a little volume, but for most of the time you could live with that. Also, the angle, as we talked about, hypercariod, supercardioid, the angle makes a big difference. So I've seen a lot of people sing it like this. They're singing over it like it's an ice cream cone. And guess what? You could barely hear me now. And now as I go like this, even at a slight angle, look how much volume I lost. So really, you want to be on axis where the sound is going to go right through the center of my voice. And my voice comes out this way, right? So this is where I'm going to get the most volume out. So if it's on a stand like that, and a lot of people, they wind up, because it's the mic gets heavy after an hour of singing. And sometimes if you're doing this, you wind up doing this and you're losing volume, and people are like, "Oh, turn me up, turn me up." I'm like, no, just put the mic where it's going to hear you. It's like an ear, and here's the whole of the ear. So make sure you understand this. And if you want to play with it with headphones on your laptop or just in rehearsal, notice the big difference in angle from there to there, and from the proximity effect and the volume difference from here to here. And also, if you're going to start doing a loud Whitney Houston note, you want to back off, because nothing annoys sound engineers more than, someone singing really soft and all of a sudden they belt it out, and it just distorts everything, and it's screechy, and it could blow a speaker or everything. Another thing to note is setting your PA, setting the input gain. So at the top of most mixers, you'll have an input gain, and what that is telling, from the output of the microphone into the board, it kind of adjusts the input signal. So what you want to do there is that a lot of singers play this trick, and we know it. They want their voice to be really loud, and they want their mic to be really loud. So when you test the mic, they're singing, "Oh, I sing like this," and they're hoping that you're going to set the mic really loud. So then when they sing, no, you're not doing yourself any favors, because it's just going to distort and overload and sound like crap. Sing your loudest note, and then they'll adjust the gain so that the loudest note is, having a high level signal, but not so loud that it's distorting, overloading the board. And then from there, that's the input. Then from there, the output is how much power I'm pushing through the power amps to make it louder or softer. But setting that input gain is really important to your clarity and getting enough. If it's too low, you're going to have a lot of noise, floor, and hiss. If it's too high, you're going to distort anytime you get a loud note or get close to the microphone or do your big notes. So it's important that you sing one of your louder passages, so they could know exactly where to set the gain, where that maximum threshold is, so that you're not going to start blowing the PA, and it's not going to do you any favors, because it's going to sound distorted and crummy. So you want to set that. Another thing is back to the feedback question, which is always the issue. One thing a lot of singers, it drives everybody crazy, is that they don't realize that if you put a microphone in front of a speaker, it will feed back, even if it's at a low volume and a little practice hall or something like that. Do not put the microphone pointed near a speaker. If you hear feedback when you step to a certain spot on the stage, avoid that spot if you can. Same thing, you have monitors here. I've seen singers where they're like this, and then in between, while they're not singing, while there's a guitar solo or something, they go, and then they want, and they just, because they want to rest their arm or something, and they put it right in front of this. I've seen this, professionals getting paid money as singers, right in front of the monitor, screeching, squealing, and they don't even realize it's them that's doing it. So do not, if you hear screeching or squealing, it has to do with one of the mics being a bad position to the speakers. Now, ideally, and this is not a very difficult or expensive solution, whatever your monitor system is going through, because it's usually probably going to be monitors more than the mains, because the mains, here's another thing. The mains, I've seen bands where the main speakers were behind them, And sometimes you're forced in this position because of the size of the stage or whatever. But if you have the mains behind you and you're playing at any kind of volume, you can't put the mics up that loud because they're going to start squealing. Put them in front of you. Right? For a small acoustic quiet thing, no big deal. But for a rock band, put them in front of you, and then you could crank them up because now they're not going to kind of come back into the mic as easily. For the monitors, same. They're going to be on the floor, but they're also going to be in the rejection zone. They're going to be pointing to this back. That's not so. They're going to be less likely to feedback. So put them in a position where the monitors are positioned in a way you could hear them, but it's going to be behind the microphone. You may still get some feedback. So this comes into another solution, which doesn't cost a ton of money if you have an equalizer. 30 some odd band equalizer is good. And you could do something called ringing out the monitors. I'm not going to go into incredible detail, but usually when something feeds back, it's a certain frequency that's feeding back. It's that's the same you could hear it. And then, so what you would do is if you have a graphic EQ or even a parametric EQ just on your monitors, you could find where that frequency is. Maybe you'll raise up different frequencies on your graphic until you hear that squealing and, oh, that's where it is. And then pull that back just a little bit. And then push your volume up a little bit more until you hear probably another frequency. And then find that. You could do, even if you just do those two frequencies, and maybe a third one. And the more bands on your EQ, the better, because it's really a very narrow frequency. So if you start pulling down tons of frequencies, it's going to just sound weird. But if you get the 1 or 2 or 3 problem frequencies and bring them back just a little bit, you could probably get quite a bit of more volume out without it squealing. And then you could kind of, if it's a fixed thing like a club or a church, you could kind of set it and forget it if you're using the same mics pretty much. If you're going into different clubs, the frequency may change depending on how it bounces off the walls and everything. Okay, another thing that we've all been in this experience with is trying to get the band to play at a more reasonable volume. Guitar players like to crank up their Marshall stack to get their tone. I'm a guitar player, and I've been guilty of this as well. But drummers are typical because you can't just turn a knob. It's how hard they hit. And even in a relatively small space, even hitting a snare drum lightly is still very loud often. And that stuff rings, and it rings throughout a room. Bass players, too, they have, boom, boom, boom. That stuff really carries. And it could often, in a small room especially, you can't really put the PA up that loud to compete. So part of it's psychology and getting the musicians to be, the more experienced musicians that you work with are often more understanding of this concept. I've heard interviews with world-renowned bands that we would definitely know of that have sold millions of records that would say, hey, when we're on stage, I don't really need my amp close by. I have, or I don't need my amp really loud because we're playing it like a conversation. I could have a conversation on stage at one of our stadium concerts, and the person next to me could hear me. That's the volume that we play at. So if they could be playing at Madison Square Garden at a conversational volume, that's low. But then so could your band. So get them to kind of play. If they back off just a little bit, and I know everybody by the end of the night they sneaky put it up a little bit more. It's just everything is clear, and it's just a matter of kind of getting people to understand that. And if they don't understand that, then maybe they're amateurs and they need to, maybe need to find new people to work with. One other thing that's a no-no is we hear a lot of the heavy metal singers or something is they'll cup the mic. So if you want to see if that helps the sound, let's try it. So if I go like this, hi, does this make it sound better or worse? Hello, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. It kind of affects the sound in a negative way. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, that doesn't really sound very pleasant, does it? No, so do not do this when you're singing unless you want to sound really bad. This is a much more natural sound. It wasn't designed to be doing that, and there's videos out there that explain as to why it messes up the sound. Just Google cupping the mic, and there's one funny video from one of the guys out there who does videos, I forget his name, that does a video on that. But don't do that. There's videos about how to hold the mic. There's vocal techniques, prima donna kind of ways. That's put my finger here, and you know what, whatever's comfortable. If you're gonna have to keep it at this angle a lot of night, all night, yeah, this can hurt. Don't be afraid to use a mic stand and switch it up. I use the mic stand a lot of times. I mean, I'm playing guitar a lot of the times, but hold it on the mic stand and work the mic stand too. Whatever's comfortable for you, as long as you're not touching and doing this sort of thing. And also make sure you realize that when you do hit it, it does cause some handling noise, but depending on the mic and depending on how it's EQ'd. The last thing I might want to talk about is your equipment. Take good care of your equipment. Don't be dropping the mic, and don't be treating it like crap. This is your lifeline. If this doesn't work good, then you sound like crap, even if you're Whitney Houston. Cables. Get a decent. You don't have to get the $60 mic Mogami cable. Get a good cable. Don't get a piece of crap, because it'll break on you. It'll start, after a few gigs. Just to get a decent quality cable. Normal. If you want to get the $60 Mogami cable, live, you're probably not going to hear the difference in the studio. This is actually a Mogami cable, but I am in the recording studio. So this, but you don't really need to. But some people are a little obsessive like me. But take good care of your mic cables. One thing that really annoys me as a pet peeve is when people try to wrap the cable around their elbow. And there's tons of videos of why this is bad, and how to properly wrap. Learn how to wrap a cable. Get a little Velcro and wrap it up nice. And maybe I'll do a separate video just on that, so that it doesn't have all weird kinks and it's not all twisted up. Because it is metal inside, and it's braided metal. So if you twist it up, it's going to hold that twist. And if you twist it again the other way, a lot of people just twist it up and knot it up and tie it together and throw it in their bag. It's like, come on, is that what you think about your performance? Because that thing is going to, bite you back one day. You're gonna be singing, and all of a sudden you're gonna pop, crackle, and or you could have mic cables. I've had mic cables for 25 years that still work perfectly. So just treat your equipment with respect. Treat everything with respect. Don't, your mixer, your speakers, everything, because it will break, especially when, I've done like hundreds of gigs over a few year period. Eventually the stuff is going to break. It's in your car, it's getting loaded in, it's getting loaded out. But why exacerbate that? Because that stuff gets expensive, replacing speaker cones, replacing, boards or whatever. So treat your stuff with respect. Treat everything as if it's made of glass. When you're loading, unloading, don't drop it. Because it's metal, but that wear and tear loosens capacitor, and all you need is one thing to be loose, and you'll be at a gig, and your monitor's cut out on you, or your volume pod on a board starts crackling and popping, and that I don't care how good you are, that sounds really unprofessional to a manager, a club owner, and customers. So treat your equipment properly, store it properly, wrap everything properly. Don't just crumple shit up and throw it, in a bag, because it'll come back to haunt you. And just to note, this microphone is a Beta 58. I'd say if I didn't know anything about someone and they wanted to get a mic, this is a good catch-all. This is a good workhorse mic. If I walk into a club and they have their own mics and they have a Beta 58, I'm like, okay, that's a good standard mic. I have certain preferences, and I'm going to do a whole nother video with a shootout with half a dozen live mics. But a Beta 58, you can't really go wrong. It works real well. Good feedback rejection, pretty good even sound, cuts through in a mix, nice. But I'm not saying it's the best mic. It depends again on your voice. But just to let you know what I'm using, it's a good, you can't kind of go wrong with the mic if you just want to get a good live mic. There's a SM58. This is the Beta 58. I've done gigs with both of them. This is SM58 is about $100. This is about 160 bucks. And there's other mics that are quite cheap that are actually of good quality. But I mean, if you're going to sing in front of hundreds of people, spending $150, it's one of the least expensive pieces of equipment you're going to have. Just a beginner mixer is going to be hundreds, or $1,200. Speakers are hundreds of dollars a piece. A guitar amplifier, $1,000, $2,000. So, come on. If you're going to complain about spending $150 on a mic when you want to be singing in front of people professionally night after night, come on. You know, just yeah, 150. There's $700 live mics from Neumann and things like that. And it's a matter of, if you want to spend that, great. Sounds it's a good microphone. And I'll do again a shootout with a bunch of those microphones. But yeah, have a decent mic, have a decent cable, and take good care of it. And if you have any questions, post them in the comments, and I'll probably reply, because I'm sure I didn't think of everything, but I think it was a good overall hitting of a lot of things that people keep coming across. And some of the specifics, I'll probably do separate videos on some of the specific things, like working with your mixer and things like that. So have fun. Good singing.